On February 22nd, 1972, two bodies were discovered at this cemetery here. However, they weren't supposed to be here at all. Later on, they were identified as 19-year-old Shirley Witten and 26-year-old Roger Higgins.
This is Oak Grove Cemetery in Wildwood, Florida. Now, these two young people had just met previously that day, early in the morning hours. They decided to come out here for a little bit of romance. Unfortunately, they were not able to leave here alive. Someone either followed them here, saw them here, met them here, more than likely followed them here, or knew they were here and came here and killed both of these young people. Sadly, this case has not been solved to this day. Hopefully, someone out there has some information and can help. We're going to give you a number to call if you do. We're going to tell you all about this case. We cordially invite you to come along.
Come along. We're at TA Travel Center.
It was Union 76 truck stop back in 1972. Shirley was actually an employee here. Now, Roger was passing through town. Roger had just gotten a job with a moving company. He was going to be a laborer for them. His boss was driving with him, and they decided to stop here to take a little break, rest for a little while. It was sometime after midnight when they showed up here. Roger met Shirley, and they hit it off right away. Roger was from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Either he or Shirley had a relatively new, dark blue Chevrolet Bel Air. Seems more likely to us the car was hers, because he was traveling with his moving company and probably would not have had a vehicle with him. They left here together sometime around 3 a.m. and headed the short distance from here to the cemetery, which is less than 3 miles away.
When the two arrived here at the cemetery, either they backed in to this entrance right here, or they went down to that entrance over there and circled around to the cemetery and ended up
right where our car is, right here. This is what the police found when they got here in the morning, was their vehicle parked right here. Actually, it wasn't the police who got here first. There was a gentleman who came here. His job that morning was to fix a headstone that had been broken. He got here around 8 o'clock in the morning. He noticed the car, and he noticed the two bodies beside the car right in this area right here when he arrived. Now, this is a very rural cemetery. Police say that someone would not have probably just stumbled upon them out here, because this is the end of this little road. And as Heather and I have been here today, what we've seen so far is one police officer come through here on patrol and no one else. A farmer working in the distance over there on his farm. So this is a very rural place. People don't just come out here. So we believe that theory to be correct, that probably someone was infatuated with this young lady. They followed her here from the store, or perhaps they went to the store and asked where she was. But if that was the case, you would think someone at the store would remember someone asking where she was and telling them that she was at the cemetery, and that would be easy to solve. So more than likely, he was monitoring them while she was working, saw them kind of maybe holding hands or doing things like that, and decided to follow them. When he saw them getting too frisky in this area here, he completely lost it. Police say the first thing he probably did was slice all 4 tires, and then he went after the couple. When police arrived, they found the two victims on the ground just outside of the car. Shirley was laying on Roger's legs, wearing only her Union 76 smock, which was basically a work apron. Roger was laying face down. All the tires were flat, and Roger and Shirley had each been stabbed more than 30 times. Investigators said all the stab wounds were less than half an inch in width, with the weapon used determined to be a small pocket knife. There was a blood trail running from the car out to the road, then back to the bodies. Apparently, Roger had tried to escape after already being stabbed, then was dragged back to the spot where he was found. He also had deep wounds on his fingers, which police assumed meant he tried to fight with his attacker in an effort to get the knife away. There were stab wounds all over the bodies. Shirley had been stabbed 33 times. She had wounds to her ear, liver, knee, chest, and legs, and also wounds to her lungs and aorta, which police say were the ones that killed her. Roger had wounds to his lungs, with one of those stabs puncturing the upper lobe of his right lung, which is what police believe killed him. He also had stab wounds from his hair on the back of his head, down his neck, to his back. They were both declared dead at the scene when police arrived. Retired former Undersheriff Gary Brennan said, "The suspect was probably jealous, in a rage. He slashed the car tires, and then things escalated from there. Sumter was a small rural county back then, in the days before the massive village's active adult retirement community had shown up. The sheriff's department did not have much experience dealing with these types of horrific crimes. Because of this, Sheriff Fred Roselle decided to bring in the Florida Criminal Investigation Department to help out. A newspaper at the time reported the keys to the Bel Air were not found. There was blood on the outside of the car, and some unidentified fingerprints were found on the car. Also, there were tire tracks of a vehicle taking off from the cemetery at a high rate of speed.
Back in 1972, there weren't many surveillance cameras on businesses or homes for that matter. No one had heard of DNA profiling. There weren't even fingerprint databases, and in this case, there weren't any witnesses, at least none who were willing to talk to the police. If Shirley did have someone obsessed with her, it seems this fact wasn't known by her coworkers or family. Perhaps it was a regular at the restaurant who hadn't yet made his feelings known. Perhaps it was someone who liked to park in the parking lot at the truck stop and watch her. We may never know. In 1992, an article in the Orlando Sentinel wrote, "The murderer hacked the young couple to death, slashing them repeatedly. The motive was not clear then, and is still not clear now. Miss Whitten had not been raped. Neither did robbery seem the cause. Police could only speculate that a Jack the Ripper was roaming the tranquil byways of Florida. No solid suspect in the killings has ever been found." We don't tend to agree with the Jack the Ripper theory, or any sort of serial killer theory for several reasons, one being how remote the cemetery was, and another being the killer only had a pocket knife to use as a weapon. Also in 1992, the FBI took a closer look at the case, stating there may have not been one, but two killers. One had a dominant personality and initiated the killings, but managed to persuade the second person to take part in order to bind him to the crime. The dominant killer probably finished school only through the 10th grade and may have worked as a mechanic or a service station attendant. Maybe even at the nearby interchange at Interstate 75 and State Road 44. Locals at the time said the cemetery was being used at night by drug dealers, and perhaps the two saw something they shouldn't have and got killed. Our problem with that theory is the idea of drug dealers being out here with only a small pocket knife as a weapon seems a bit off as well. Whitten's father, a man by the name of Herb Whitten, was irritated that the police couldn't solve the case, so he started up his own investigation. He even scraped together all the money he could afford to offer a $1,000 reward. He said Shirley was his firstborn child and that he loved her very much. He said he had her frog gigging when she was about 2 years old, and that they still enjoyed being outside and hunting together up until her death. It has now been 50 years since the murders. You would think since there was a good bit of blood, fingerprints, and tire tracks at the scene, apparently from the killer, police would be able to put together a DNA profile and get this case solved. But so far, that hasn't happened. If you have any information that may help police solve this case, no matter how tiny a detail you may think it is, please contact the Sumter County Sheriff's Department at 352-569-1600.